Florida Writer Podcast, a discussion about writing and other things. Hello and welcome to this edition of the Florida Writer Podcast. I'm your host, Allison Nissen, and today I am lucky enough to have with me Rick Partlow. Rick, can you give me a 60-second elevator pitch about who you are and what you write?
My name is Rick Partlow. I live in Central Florida, and I am a substitute teacher and writer, and I've been writing and publishing since 2011. Well, I've been writing before that, but I write science fiction, military science fiction, and space opera. My biggest series thus far is the Wholesale Slaughter military science fiction series that I'm working on currently for Aethon Publishing. I also had the Glory Boy, Birthright, and Recon series that did pretty well. I've been self-publishing on Amazon, and I currently have a contract with a small press, and that's who I am.
That's who you are. Okay, you mentioned that you write space opera. I'm envisioning someone singing arias, but I have a feeling that's not what you're talking about.
It's a takeoff of the term horse opera for the old cowboy movies in the 50s. Space opera is like Star Trek, Star Wars. It's, not hard science fiction. It's, people traveling in hyperspace with aliens and blasters, that kind of thing.
It has a little bit more of a realistic, humanistic element to it?
No, not realistic at all. It's more of it's not a fantasy, but it's not, doesn't concentrate on the technology. It doesn't try to say, oh yeah, this is something we're working on now, and and we're gonna use this in 100 years, and this is very important. Like Greg Bear, I don't know if you ever heard of Greg Bear, but he's a science fiction writer. He writes hard science fiction, really hard technical details. I don't do that. I write like a Star Trek kind of science fiction where the technology is whatever is needed to propel the story. The story is the important thing, the characters in the story.
Well, story is always important to writers, or at least for me it is. And I think that we draw our inspiration from all the activities, events, and things that happen in our own personal lives. What is your biggest inspiration for writing these type of books?
Really, it's just reading science fiction when I was a kid. I mean, I guess maybe the fact that I'm a child of the late 60s, that the space race was going on, and the moon shots had just happened when I was a little kid. That kind of thing inspired me. I was always checking books out from the library with space, astronauts and spaceships and moonshot stuff. So I guess just growing up in Florida, not that far from Cape Canaveral, during the whole space race inspired me to get into science fiction, feeling for a real life inspiration. But that was the era right after the big classic era of science fiction. It happened in the late 50s. I grew up in the late 60s, so all those books were sitting in the library. And the combination of that inspired me to get into science fiction.
Well, you have written quite a few books, and I imagine that your writing routine is somewhat structured.
You would think, but...
Do you have a desk? I mean, do you sit down every morning at 6 o'clock and you write for an hour? What's your routine?
It depends on what time of year it is, because I said I'm substitute teacher during the school year. So when I work, I go to work and get things settled in the class, and then I'll open my laptop and write a little bit while they're doing their work. And I'll do that while I'm there, and then come home and go to the gym and come home and write some more, then eat dinner, then write some more. During the summer, it's been kind of chaotic. I wake up whenever, because I have this policy. I don't set my alarm during the summer at all. So I wake up whenever and I start writing, and I'm pretty much writing the whole day long, on and off, sometimes till 1 a.m. I mean, I don't sit there the whole time. You have to do things. You have to take the dogs outside, go to the gym, or go to the grocery store and eat dinner. But when I'm not doing something else, I'm sitting down and writing.
You are very dedicated to your craft, which I am incredibly impressed by. Do you ever stop and think, oh, I need to outline this, or it's not going where I want it to be?
I outline everything nowadays.
Are you out? So do you just outline and then fill in the puff out each line, so to speak?
It depends on how long what I'm writing is, but if it's going to be a long series or a long book, something involved and complex, I will sit down and first I will write a synopsis, and then I'll start making like a chapter by chapter outline. I'll maybe just a sentence or two for each chapter as to what happens in it, and then I'll come back and I will fill in more details with each chapter. And if I think of a scene I want in there or particular impression I want people to be left with, I'll write that down too under the chapter heading. If I think of a good line of dialogue I want to be in there, a conversation that has to be, I'll write that. And sometimes for a 100,000 word book, I'll wind up with a 10,000 word outline if I go at it long enough and have the time. But I always have a chapter by chapter outline for each book I'm writing.
And how long does it take you to make an outline?
I usually give myself a couple weeks.
That's a lot. Okay, that makes sense because, and while I like to say I'm an outliner, I tend to write an outline and adjust it as I am actually putting words on paper. So I'll start with something and then it changes and shifts and moves. And I think that's why I tend to write short things, because I can just get it done and feel like I've accomplished something.
Well, I do that too, somewhat. I mean, if I'm going along in the book and something feels a little off, like I needed to add something that wasn't there, I'll go back and put in another chapter if I need to. I don't like to, but I do.
What about in a series? So if you're writing 100,000 words for one book, does that then become part of a series, or is that a standalone book and the series are shorter?
It just depends on the series. I mean, I have a couple of series where the books go over 100,000 words each. Those are shorter series, like trilogies. The longer series, you usually have shorter books because you want to keep the plot going from book to book. You don't want to wrap everything up in one book. But I think the current series I'm working on, which is going to be 6 books, is around 80,000 words per novel. I have another one that's even shorter. That was a 4-book series. I think it went about 70 or 75 per novel. But like I said, there's others that go over 100,000. It just depends on what sort of a story you're telling.
So when you're writing the series, do you outline the entire series at the very beginning, or do you just start with each book and then it evolves from there?
It depends on the type of series. I wrote a series that was kind of space opera about people kicking around in a starship and having adventures. And that one I just outlined book per book. I didn't really have a series arc. But the current one that I'm writing now is Wholesale Slaughter. It's a military science fiction, kind of a long war story. And I wrote synopsis of the whole series before I started. I didn't write a detailed chapter by chapter outline of each book, but I wrote, like, this book is going to tell the story of this, and this book is going to tell the story of that, all the way to the end. And I adjusted it, tweaked it a little bit, but mostly I've stuck with that.
That's a lot of planning.
It is. And I think part of that was due to the fact that I had to pitch this to a publisher, pitch a 6-book series to them. So they wanted a synopsis of what was going to happen. So I had to come up with one.
I am inspired by the fact that you have the tenacity to keep it going like that, because it really would be simple to just say, I'm done with that one. I want to take a break. And you say, I'm done with that first book. Now I have book 2, book 3, book 4, and you keep at it. And that obviously goes to your dedication again to the craft. And so you've had a lot of successes with this, being able to publish, self-publish, beginning to work with a small press. Would you consider those your successes? What would be your biggest success?
My biggest success, I'm kind of torn, because there's big success financially, and then there's one that's more personal level. And I feel like on a personal level, finishing my first book felt like the biggest success, because it took a long time to finish my first real book that was suitable for publication. I started that book in 1988, 88 or 89, and I didn't finish it until 1995. You know how first books go; they take forever, and that one took a long time, and that felt felt like a huge accomplishment to me. And it's still, I wouldn't say it's my favorite book, but it's my favorite book to look back on because it felt like such a huge hurdle to get over. Financially, my biggest success was Glory Boy, which is a standalone military science fiction novel that's part of a universe with 12 books in it, but it's a standalone story. But that really kicked off my attempt to be a professional writer, because before that it was more of a hobby. But when I saw how much money I made from Glory Boy, I'm like, I should try to do this on a regular basis.
How do you promote your books?
There's a variety of ways. It's ever changing because the market for promotion is constantly shifting. Amazon Marketing Services has ads that you can run, and for a while that was considered like the way to market your books. But then recently the price went up. It's hard to explain in a little bit, but you basically bid on how much you want to spend for marketing. The higher you bid, the more likely it is you're going to get seen by more people, but you're also going to spend a lot more money if those people see you. And recently, the price you had to pay to get seen by people went up precipitously. So that's kind of in flux as far as how much you want to spend for marketing through Amazon. So I'm trying alternative ways like Facebook ads. I've had a lot of luck with Facebook ads, not so much with BookBub ads, which is that's a ad. There's a BookBub which sends this email out to millions of people with free and discounted books, and you can buy an ad that goes in the bottom of their email. The thing with BookBub ads, though, is you can spend lots and lots of money for very little return with that if you don't know what you're doing. So that's kind of tricky. I've had most of my luck with Facebook ads, cross promotions with other authors, newsletter swaps, things like that.
So you have a healthy list of newsletter swaps that you can use?
Well, I mean, my personal newsletter is about like 2,500 people, but some people have huge, like 8,000 or 9,000 people newsletters, and I have people that I know who are willing to do newsletter swaps with me, other science fiction authors. That networking with them is, if you're going to be an independent author, networking with other authors is very much key to marketing and promotion.
Silly question, but you just send them a letter saying, hey, I write these type of books too. Do you want to swap ads?
Well, it's important to have a relationship first, I think. A lot of these people I've met in person at conventions or conferences, and I also am Facebook friends with many of them, a lot more than I met in person. We hang out the same like chats and podcasts and things like that. There's YouTube shows that come on that are about writing, about science fiction. And if you hang out there in the chat, you meet people who are authors as well. I mean, and sometimes famous ones. And then you hook up with them on Facebook and you meet their Facebook friends and you start messaging back and forth saying, I've got a new book coming out this week. Do you have anything you want to swap newsletters with? That sort of thing. So networking it's a very involved job. If you're doing this yourself, doing the marketing yourself, you have to, marketing is pretty much a full-time job on top of the writing. So you have to network with a whole bunch of people to make it work.
I think so many people start writing because they have a love for the craft, and then they don't realize that there's so much more involved. And as the world of publishing changes, we can make a lot of money doing it, all the marketing and promotions by ourselves. However, it is that full-time job of being able to get out there, to network, to know how to do that. And that makes a lot of people uncomfortable.
Well, that's one reason I signed that deal with the small press, because they do all the marketing, they handle all the publicizing, and I can just write. I mean, they do all the covers and the editing. It's kind of a relief. I mean, it's not like it's Tor Books or Banned Books. It's not going to put my book in the Barnes and Noble or Books A Million, but they got me a contract with Audible Studios, for audiobooks for the series. and they handle all the formatting and putting it out in different variations. They handle the ads, so it's been kind of liberating to go back to just writing.
So working with a small press, you think that's a pretty good way to go?
I think that if you are serious about being a professional writer, you have to do a little of everything. Small press, writing on your own and promoting it on your own, collaborating with other people. I think that the future of independent authors is being a hybrid where you have to just dip your toe into everything.
Fantastic advice. I'm sure many of our listeners can put all that to use. So Rick, I'm going to shift gears now, and we are going to move to our rapid fire questions. Are you ready?
I guess so.
Do you watch reality television?
Some.
What do you watch?
Survivor.
Somehow that seems to be fitting. You able to take any of their plot lines and use them?
No. I enjoy the personal drama. It's entertaining.
Well, I guess if you starve someone enough, they can get a little testy.
I also watch that show Alone. That's on forget National Geographic or something, where they drop people in the middle of nowhere and make them film themselves starving for weeks at a time. But the winner gets $1 million. So.
All right. When was the last time you saw the sunrise?
I see the sunrise way too much. When I work, I'm up at 5:30 in the morning, so I see the sunrise like almost every day, every weekday.
Do you look out a window as you're writing?
Sometimes. It just depends on where I'm writing at.
And what is your favorite musical instrument?
To play or to hear?
Either.
I guess guitar.
Do you play guitar?
No, but I always wanted to.
You and 3/4 of the world. Everybody wants to be able to play guitar.
I had one and tried to learn to play it. Never worked out.
Never worked out, huh? No. All right. Well, Rick, this has been an absolutely fabulous conversation. How can people get in touch with you?
I am on Facebook under the Facebook page Duty Honor Planet, facebook.com/Duty Honor Planet. I also have rickpartlow.com, which is my author website. Those would be the best ways to get a hold of me.
All right. Well, Rick, thank you so much for stopping by. This has been another edition of the Florida Writer Podcast. Allison out. Rick Partlow is the rarest of species, a native Floridian. Born in Tampa, he attended Florida Southern College and graduated with a degree in history and commissioned in the U.S. Army as an infantry officer. His lifelong love of science fiction began with Half Spacesuit Will Travel and other Heinlein juveniles. Somewhere submerged in the worlds of others, Rick began to create his own worlds. He has written 27 books in 7 different series, and his short stories have been included in 10 different anthologies. He's currently working on a 6-volume military science fiction saga about a mercenary unit called Wholesale Slaughter. Besides writing and reading science fiction and fantasy, he enjoys outdoor photography, hiking, and camping.